what should I do? And the branch of philosophy that deals with that question specifically is, of course, moral philosophy. I'm going to talk to you about the 3 books you need to read if you want to get started in understanding that question. Traditionally, philosophers break up moral philosophy into 3 competing theories. The first one is virtue ethics, the second one is Kantian deontology, and the third one is consequentialism. I'm going to give you one book for each major theory, argued by one of the original proponents of the theory, so that you can get started. The first book you should read is Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. Now, this was the book that personally nerd-sniped me over a decade ago to get into moral philosophy, because the first argument he gives, once you understand it, you immediately realize how useful this is going to be for every other topic in your life. And that is, what is good? And he answers it in a very simple manner. He goes, before we can figure out what a good action is or a good person is, let's figure out what a good object is. Now imagine you're shooting a bow and arrow, okay? What is a good arrow? Well, a good arrow is an arrow that hits its target. Similarly, an action that is good is an action which hits its target. Now, what is the target of all humans? Well, you'd have to read the book to find out. But once you have this idea of goodness in place, he focuses not on acting in accordance with goodness, but rather becoming the right kind of person such that you naturally do good actions. That's what virtue is for. If you cultivate these virtues, you will naturally want to do good actions. That's virtue ethics. The second book you should read is Kant, The Groundwork for the Metaphysics of Morals. Now, this book is a little more complicated, but it's nothing you can't handle if you just take your time and you underline and you read slowly. Now, Kant, for me, is the clearest example of a philosophical genius. Okay? When you study a lot of philosophy, you can kind of go, yeah, I could see, I think I could have come up with that if I had like 1,000 years, right? With Kant, in 1,000,000 years, I would have never come up with any of the stuff he came up with. It is just, he was aiming at a target no one was even thinking to aim at, and he nails it. His argument is a little more complicated, but the high level is rather than becoming the right kind of person, your action is right if it is in accordance with a principle that all of us can universally will. So it's a little more abstract, but it's a must read. The final book you should read is John Stuart Mill's Utilitarianism. Now, he wasn't the first proponent of utilitarianism, but he does give the clearest account for people just trying to get started. And this is a theory that I think if you spend a few minutes thinking about moral philosophy, you're probably going to end up intuiting this theory. It's very common sense. That's not to say it's correct. There are definitely issues with the theory. However, the presentation is very clear, and the ideas are high leverage. And simply, it's an act is right if and only if it maximizes the happiness of everyone. Now, that sounds simple, but the upshot of that is we can now justify why we should care about non-human animals. One of the greatest lines in moral philosophy comes from the guy who comes right before John Stuart Mill, Jeremy Bentham, which is, it is not whether they can reason, but whether they can suffer. And it was from that point where a lot of the utilitarians were able to argue way ahead of their time for women's suffrage, for animal liberation, and many other things. So those are the 3 main theories of moral philosophy and the books to get started. Follow me for part 2, where we get into the deep cuts. This is stuff you're not going to see on your For You page.